Hi, my name is Jackie Herring. I'm the Associate Specialist at Virginia Department of Education for Pupil Transportation, and today I'm going to talk to you about transporting students with special needs. Today we're going to talk about transporting children with special needs in Virginia, navigating the laws and regulations. When you are training new drivers, make sure that you train in all of the different types of school buses that you have in your fleet, and that new drivers feel comfortable with every type of vehicle that you have, including your special needs buses. The purpose of this presentation, first we're going to talk about the regulations governing pupil transportation at the VAC 2070-350. In part, that all drivers shall receive training in transportation of students with special needs. Compliance issues with special education laws and regulations related to transportation. We're going to talk about requirements versus best practices. Better understanding of your role in ensuring that all children receive a free, appropriate public education. So special education is much like a magic trick. There's lots of steps involved and everyone has to be focused in order to get it right. But when it comes right down to it, it really isn't magic at all. It's a defined process, and as long as everyone follows the process, you will be in compliance. What is special education? Special education is defined as specially designed instruction provided at no cost to the parent or parents in order to meet the unique needs of a child with disability. 8 VAC 2081-10. Related services. The definition for related services is defined as developmental, corrective, or other supportive services as are required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education and include transportation. So transportation is a supportive service. 8 VAC 2081-10. Transportation as a relative service. Transportation is defined to include travel to and from school and between schools, travel in and around school buildings, and any specialized equipment such as special or adaptive buses, lifts, and ramps if required to provide special transportation for a child with disability. And there's the federal code and then the 8 VAC 2081-10. Your regulating authority. So we have IDEA of 2004, Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. A Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. You often hear it referred to as just a 504 plan. Americans with Disability Act, ADA. No Child Left Behind Act, NCLB. Regulations governing special education programs for children with disabilities in Virginia. Virginia regulations. Office of Special Programs, the OSEP. Office of Civil Rights, OCR, local policy and procedure. It's so important that you understand your local school district's policies and procedures. Virginia Code requirements. Students with disabilities in Virginia are entitled to be transported to and from the school or class and home at no cost in order to enable the student to obtain the benefit of educational programs and opportunities. Code of Virginia 22.1-221. Some terminology. We have FAPE, IEP, an MDR, FBA, BIP, BIP, LRE, modification, and accommodation. Free appropriate public education, FAPE, means special education and related services that are provided at the public expense, under public supervision and direction, and without charge. Meet the standards of the Virginia Board of Education, include preschool, elementary school, middle school, and secondary school education in the state, and are provided in conformity with the individual education program that meets the requirements set forth in state and federal regulations. Individual education program, often referred to as the IEP. A written statement for a child with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised in a team meeting in accordance with specified regulations, which specifies the individual needs of the child and what special education and related services are necessary to meet those needs. IEP development. Bus drivers may be and should be included in the IEP meeting. If the driver can't actually be at the meeting, documentation from the driver should be welcomed and a representative should be there from the transportation department. Bus drivers' input could be critical in the developmental review and revision of the student's plan. Communicate with the IEP case manager regarding behavioral incidents, observations of the student, intervention strategies, and other concerns. So what that's saying basically is that you need to document any type of record that you have for a student that may have a IEP or special needs, and talk to that team about this student and the actions that you've taken during his or her time on the school bus. Document all behavioral incidents in detail. IEP responsibility. School divisions are required to ensure that each child's IEP is accessible to any service provider who is responsible for the implementation of the IEP, and that providers are informed of their responsibilities related to implementing of the child's IEP and are made aware of the specific accommodations, modifications, and support that must be provided to the child in accordance with the IEP. Bus drivers are required to implement the provisions of the child's IEP that relate to the child's transportation and behavioral needs while in transport. Manifestation Determination Review, referred to as MDR. A process to review all relevant information and the relationship between the child's disability and the behavior subject to disciplinary action. 8 VAC 2081-10. Manifestation Determination Review, MDR. An MDR is required when the school division is considering a long-term suspension of more than 10 consecutive school days, and when a series of removals constitute a pattern because the removals accumulate to more than 10 school days. Bus discipline. Federal and state law regarding students with disabilities outline procedural protections for these students, including discipline procedures. These procedural protections must be applied in all school environments, the classroom, the cafeteria, and when transported. However, the student may be disciplined for behavior incidents occurring while in transport to or from school. Two types of bus suspension. You have short term, which is 1 to 10 days, or long term, more than 10 consecutive days. If alternative arrangements are not made for the student to receive educational services, then a bus suspension will count in the number of removal days, even if the student is not suspended from class. Only the school's provisions of an alternate means of transportation erases the removal. Otherwise, the bus suspension counts as a disciplinary removal, just like an out-of-school suspension. Impact on the student's access to FAPE. Some alternative arrangements may be changing the school division's mode of transportation. The parent provides transportation. The public provides transportation, like jaunt or a transit. But it must be at no cost to the child or the parent. The IEP team's decision to permanently change. School personnel may consider any unique circumstance on a case-by-case basis when deciding to order a change in placement for a child violating a school conduct code. Functional Behavioral Assessment, FBA. The definition is a process to determine the underlying cause or functions of a child's behavior that impede the learning of the child with the disability or the learning of the child's peers. 8 VAC 2081-10. The BIP, Behavioral Intervention Plan. A plan that utilizes positive behavioral interventions and supports to address behaviors that interfere with the learning of students with a disability or the learning of others, or behaviors that require disciplinary action. 8 VAC 2081-10. Least Restrictive Environment, LRE. means that to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are included with their non-disabled peers, and that their exclusion occurs only when the severity of the disability is such that participation with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. AVAC 2081-10. Transportation and the LRE. The IEP team determines how the child will be transported. That's why it's so important that transportation is part of that meeting. Whether they're transported by bus, by another type of bus, or by alternative means. The parent brings them in, or the school system pays for someone else to bring the student to and from school. Modification versus accommodation. Modification usually involves a physical type of change. Accommodation usually requires a special circumstance to occur for the child. The IEP should outline any modifications or accommodations required for transportation. Modification could mean a special restraint installed, a ramp, an elevator, a wheelchair access. These are all types of modifications. Accommodation could look something like this. The student would be last on, first off, door-to-door pickup instead of curb pickup, bus stop versus home pickup, use of an aid, seat placement, where you're going to put that student, seating arrangement, maybe they need a special friend next to them, a special route, a shortened route, alternative transportation, and signaling to the student. Other issues, driving techniques and types of wheelchair, preparation of wheelchair prior to loading, and the proper tie downs that are used for wheelchair securement. Medical issues. The school division has a responsibility to appropriately monitor and maintain medical devices that are needed to maintain the health and safety of the child, including breathing, nutrition, or operation of other bodily functions, while the child is transported to and from school. This is a federal code 34 CFR 300.34B22. Responsibilities. It is our responsibility to referring, conferring, implementing, documenting, and reviewing. The 504 plan. It's governed by the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, developed in accordance with the policies established by the local school division. Requirements for implementation remain the same as for the IEP. We want to avoid assumptions that it's not a special education child. We don't want to make independent decisions alone. We want to be part of that team, part of that IEP team. We want to be communicating, and we can't have the out of sight, out of mind. And we also don't want to assume that someone else is going to take care of it. We need to do our part as transportation to ensure a safe ride to and from school. And we need to document accurately and often. And we need to protect those documents as well. When you're sure, you want to document. When you're in doubt, you ask questions and you document. Be proactive. Always document what you're doing with a particular student, what you've tried, what didn't work, what did work. Perhaps the child is on a new medication and you have a great relationship with the parent. You can talk to them and say, he's really, really sleepy in the mornings. Maybe we need to adjust his meds. You can certainly document that you spoke with the parent about it. And then you share this information with the school, with the teachers, and the IEP team. Maintain your documentation. One last thought. You make a difference. Without you, the final piece could be missing. This PowerPoint was brought to us by Hank Millward at Virginia Department of Education. Thank you, Hank. To follow up on this wonderful PowerPoint that Hank offered for us, we are going to show a video by Peggy Burns. It's called The Road to Compliance for Special Needs Drivers. This video is going to talk about the bus driver's role in the education process, going that extra mile, and the framework from laws and regulations.
When you're a driver that says good morning and you know the students on your bus, you're setting the stage for students that can't wait to get on the bus because they love their bus driver.
A lot of the teachers couldn't do this job, and they admit it, is that they really couldn't do it. They like the kids in front of them, not behind them.
Our school board recognized them as they appreciate what they do, and that they stated as well, the Educational Day for Kids can't even happen without them.
I can't stress the importance of a bus driver's role in the education process.
Perhaps you haven't known all the positive things people say about you. Your colleagues really are aware of the important work you do. Hi, I'm Peggy Burns, and you're the person who begins the school day for students with disabilities. You're the one responsible to get your riders to school safely and ready to learn. You may be in the driver's seat because you bid that route, maybe because you have a heart, a special feeling for students with disabilities. Perhaps you were simply assigned to a bus with less capacity. Either way, you're in a significant position to impact the whole day, maybe the whole life of a very special young person. School staff, parents, and the students you work with know that you really must go that extra mile for the students who ride with you. And because so much is required of you, I've developed this training program to help support you in your work. The framework for the special job you do comes from federal law. So I'm going to begin by giving you some insight into the legal foundation for the education and transportation of these special children. You may have wondered why school districts transport students with special needs, even in situations when they don't transport a student without such challenges. Or the ways you take a student to school might be different from the ways others ride. The explanation is found in statute. Congress took action during the 1970s to ensure that students with disabilities would be educated appropriately. The obligation to provide that appropriate education, free of charge to parents, is grounded in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, sometimes called IDEA or IDEA. The law provides that students with disabilities are entitled to education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for the future. Decisions about what's required for each student are made by a designated team of people. The team's decisions are captured in an individualized education program, the IEP. That's how federal law refers to this important document. Some states have different names for it, but I'll call it the IEP. IDEA requires that the IEP provide for transportation when it's necessary for the child to access his or her special education services. There's a further legal requirement. The district must see to it that the school bus environment is safe. Another federal law, usually referred to as simply Section 504, can have a wide impact on pupil transportation issues. Section 504 requires that school districts create a level playing field so that students with disabilities will have a true opportunity to participate in all programs offered by the school district. Transportation may be necessary to make that happen. Here, too, a team develops a plan for the content and delivery of services. This plan can override usual bus policies, like a diabetic student's need to eat on the bus, or even the administration of medication as authorized under state law and regulation. So IDEA and Section 504 have a lot to do with when we provide transportation. Under these two laws, the starting point for how we provide transportation is the regular school bus. If a child with disabilities can safely ride the regular bus, that's the right mode of transportation for that student. Sometimes, though, a safe ride on the regular bus just isn't possible, even with the use of special accommodations or modifications. Then the team may assign the student to a smaller capacity bus. If particular equipment or additional adult support is necessary, those needs will also be reflected in the IEP. If the regular bus stop is not appropriate for this student, the IEP may include pickup and drop-off information. There may also be a behavior intervention plan to address behavior caused by the child's disability. Now, neither IDEA nor Section 504 requires that school transportation professionals be included in every team meeting, but both laws encourage the teams to receive input from the transportation department when they will discuss how the student will get to school. In my experience, however, that recommendation is often overlooked. While that's troublesome, it doesn't change the fact that you have to follow a student's IEP or Section 504 plan. That's very important. So if you need to know more about a student with special needs, be sure to ask for help to fill in the gaps in your information. An IEP or Section 504 plan is an important part of the rules you must follow where a student with disabilities is concerned. But they're not the only rules. The basic building blocks of your job include your policies and procedures, along with your job description, contracts, and the driver handbook. They are the framework for your role in the student's education. If you overlook even basic operational rules, it can have especially serious consequences for the students who ride your bus. Here's an example. In an actual case, parents of one student learned that their child's driver handed out M&Ms every Friday in return for good behavior. They found out when their child arrived home with the candy. As a matter of fact, the driver handbook prohibited this kind of reward system. So any way you look at it, the driver should have found a different way to thank the students. But there's more. The driver didn't know that this student had a life-threatening peanut allergy. Like other very serious food or environmental allergies, that's a disability under the law. M&Ms, like some other foods, are manufactured in a plant where peanuts are processed, and they may contain peanuts. Fortunately, the parents brought the mistake to the driver's attention before there were serious consequences. Here's the point. You don't always get the specific information you need about individual students on your bus. The reasons behind instructions you're given may not always be obvious. Ask questions when you need to, and you are always responsible for knowing and following the rules of your transportation operation. But this isn't a game of Simon Says. The rules don't specify every move you're to make, do they? When initiative is expected, you need to do the planning. You need to use your good judgment. The legal standard is that you must act like a reasonably prudent driver. Now let's apply that notion to behavior issues. I want to mention one of the significant situations I know you sometimes face. Perhaps you have students who act aggressively toward other students. Some emotional or physical disabilities can go hand in hand with these serious behaviors. And we all know that students can get loud or just plain verbally inappropriate with other students or with you. There is no question that this is a safety issue. And don't assume that's just the way it is. It's important that you report your concerns. Your job is to protect the safety of the ride of everyone. And sometimes you can't do that alone. Now, speaking of behavior, I don't want to forget to tell you about two strange headlines that appeared on the very same date. One came from a news service in Hawaii. The other was in a newspaper in Florida. Both news stories included disturbing reports that school bus drivers had used duct tape to quiet disrespectful students with disabilities. I'll bet you can guess that this technique was not included in the IEP for either of these students. Sometimes standard behavior management strategies, like a well-thought-out seating plan, can prevent vulnerable students from getting hurt. If you know two students need to be separated, be sure to separate them. And I don't suggest you do what one driver did. He used younger children to separate older students with aggressive histories. Make adjustments to your seating arrangement as necessary when circumstances change, and document these actions so that substitute drivers can know and follow your directions. Let's switch gears. I'd like to tell you about another matter that crops up quite a bit in cases about special needs transportation. I'm referring to pick-up or drop-off locations. While some students with disabilities will be picked up at their curb, others may get on the bus at the regular stop or at a specially designated stop near their home. Your riders are often especially vulnerable to harm, and that means it's extremely important that you follow the rules. Judicial opinions are not very sympathetic to drivers that allow a student to disembark at an unauthorized location. And judges are not kind to school systems that tolerate a driver's creating a stop independently. So what should you do if you think there's a better or easier place to drop off a student or to pick up a student? It can be difficult when you feel like you're faced with that dilemma, but I'm going to simplify the decision for you. If you operate outside the IEP or other directive, you're no longer in the circle of safety. In that circle, you're protected from legal and employment consequences. When you follow the rules, you'll be fine. Risking student injury by choosing pick-up and drop-off locations is quite different from dangerous circumstances that may be beyond your control. I'm thinking, for example, about motorists who don't stop for a school bus when the law requires them to do so. In that case, there may be little you can do other than reporting repeat offenses. But don't take action, ever, that can increase the threat of harm to students with disabilities. Always remember that safety is your focus and your commitment, even if a parent or student asks for a favor just this one time. And you know, if for any reason you have a question about where to drop a student off, dispatch can be your lifeline. Just as you must follow directives about pickup and drop-off points, so too you must take established schedules very seriously. For any student, getting to school late can be embarrassing and disruptive to learning. But for your special students, late arrival can create unnecessary challenges. A surprising number of legal cases allege that a driver has been consistently late in getting a student to school. A driver is not in the classroom to observe firsthand what happens when the student arrives late to class in the middle of a lesson, but try to envision his discomfort. And it can be worse for a student with disabilities who might really struggle to be accepted and to learn. Now, I know it can be hard to execute an on-time arrival when a student you pick up at the curb isn't ready when he's supposed to be.
Transportation, this is bus 168. I'm here to pick up Kelly, and I've been here 2 minutes at her stop, and there's no sign of her anywhere. What would you like me to do?
When that happens consistently, you might ask the parent to communicate with the transportation department so that appropriate adjustments can be made. Or what if a safety issue with a particular wheelchair or other piece of equipment causes you to be behind schedule? Relay the problem to dispatch as soon as you know about it. What should you do if a parent brings a child to the bus with a wheelchair that's not safe for transportation. Don't accept the chair in that condition. But don't assume there's simply no school for that child that day. With support from dispatch, you may identify the best message to relate to the parent. After all, this can be a stressful situation for all involved, but you can present your concerns in productive ways that include the possibility of alternative approaches. I want you to recognize that harsh refusals to allow the child on the bus may fly in the face of a school district's legal responsibilities. Let the parent know that you're seeking guidance on how to proceed. And be sensitive to the young ears of your rider. Just because his legs may not work doesn't mean his brain isn't processing. Your bus is more than just a ride somewhere. It means a lot to your students that they're going on the bus to school. I want to talk with you now about how to handle information you have about particular students. First of all, let me tell you, I know it's seldom enough. You and I know that it can be so important for you to be informed about anything that can impact a student's ride. But whether you're talking in the driver's lounge or out in the neighborhood, the law requires that you respect the confidentiality of the information you are given. Perhaps your supervisors, trainers, or outside consultants have encouraged you to learn from your peers. It can be useful to share effective strategies, for example, for responding to behavior dilemmas or to physical challenges that compromise safety. And I think that's good advice. But while networking with colleagues can be helpful, be very careful not to identify your riders in any way. When conversations about student management techniques refer to the student by name, they're simply not for public consumption. And sometimes you don't even have to name the student for another driver or attendant to know who you're talking about. Those discussions must be private too. One of the ways you respect confidentiality is by following your district procedure about protecting information in the Student Special Needs folder. The law doesn't specify the form or place for keeping student health or behavior management information. Your supervisors have the responsibility to make reasonable decisions about storage and communication of such information. You need to carry out those decisions consistently. A significant number of legal cases focus on the proper use of assistive equipment. Wheelchairs, car seats, oxygen, safety vests, tie-downs, trach tubes. Those of you who have been working with students with disabilities for a while could make a long list of the paraphernalia that has come on board with your students. I cannot stress how important it is that you know the reasons for these various pieces of equipment and use them correctly. Improper securement of a wheelchair or faulty attachment of a child safety restraint system are serious concerns that appear in lawsuits all too often. Be sure you know how to perform all the functions that go with this equipment and that you do so properly each and every time. And as important as it is to manage securement correctly from a mechanical point of view, don't forget that's a real live person you're working with. Talk to children and involve them to the extent appropriate while you're securing them.
Get those on? Good girl.
Sometimes your young Houdinis can escape from safety vests and other systems that are supposed to keep them in their seats. When that happens, let administrators know immediately and report right away when a student acts out or hurts himself or others or verbally abuses his peers or staff. I want to address an issue now that's appeared all too frequently in the headlines and in the courts, and most often in the case of students with disabilities. Your district or company may have developed a plan or purchased a system to ensure that no student is left on the bus. Some of these plans and systems are wonderful, but all of them take your cooperation in order to be effective. When you walk to the back of the bus, your
Hazel,
eyes must
Hazel,
be
wake up, sweetie.
wide
It's time to go to
open,
school.
and you must be searching
Can't you have a good day
attentively and thoroughly. Let me tell you about a case in which a driver was sued. She failed to stop at the school where a 4-year-old was to attend a special needs class. The child was severely disabled, could not verbally communicate, and was wheelchair bound. The driver drove directly to the bus barn, parked the bus, and left the child behind. The court was outraged, saying that the student was trapped and abandoned. He was alone in the bus for approximately 2 hours until the driver returned. And in another case, a bus attendant who failed to notice a sleeping child was convicted of attempted child endangerment. That judge felt she was especially neglectful, since she never had more than 12 students in her care. That very morning, this attendant had helped the 7-year-old get on the bus. A short time later, she failed to notice that he never got off. It was her job to check for sleeping children, and she had been specially trained. This is an area in which you can't afford to make a mistake, even once. But no matter what, you must communicate to parents, school officials, or your supervisors about anything that happens on the bus that threatens the emotional or physical safety of a student. You remember the first case I mentioned in which a driver bypassed a school, leaving a severely disabled student trapped on the bus? The parent didn't even learn it had happened until the next day when she was talking with the student's teacher. The teacher mentioned that she was glad to have Dennis back. Dennis had never made it to school the day before, but his mom hadn't been notified of the child's absence. And if you put yourself in that parent's place, wouldn't you have been outraged? Maintaining trust is essential because the parents of students with disabilities depend on you to such a high degree. Perhaps you can imagine the desperation of parents who must feel helpless when they send their dependent children off in others' care. You have a lot to do with maintaining parents' confidence in the entire system. You have a lot to do, in fact, with your rider's school day. I think that's what one mother of a disabled youngster had in mind when she wrote in a letter to a magazine several years ago, "Excellent bus drivers are aware of their place on the team that educates my child. The best drivers don't limit their job to safe driving, even though safe driving is their primary goal." She's right. As you build relationships with students, parents, and educators, you can help remove the barriers along a special student's road to learning. We could have a really interesting brainstorming session to discuss all the characteristics of the best drivers for students with disabilities. But I suggest to you that we could sum it up this way. An excellent driver participates fully and effectively as a member of a team that supports student welfare and achievement. Moreover, each of you knows the joy that can accompany your work. You truly have the ability to jumpstart a student's day. The road to compliance with the law, it turns out, is traveled best by transportation professionals who understand their responsibilities and take their important work to heart. Your job is essential for the students who ride with you. Thank you for all you do.
Today we're going to talk about writing effective evacuation plans. And this PowerPoint is brought to us by Kathleen Furneaux. She's the Executive Director of Pupil Transportation Safety Institute in New York. And I was fortunate enough to hear her speak at the TSD conference in Texas. So I'm going to share that with you. It's for transporting students with disabilities and preschoolers. So first up with evacuations, we need to understand attitudes. What is the organization's attitude about school bus evacuation? Are they taking it seriously? Is it something that they dread to do, or is it something that they're excited to do? Is the bus driver excited about the evacuation practices? We need to make sure that our attitudes are right, because they certainly trickle down to all the way to the students. So building those relationships, it takes more than a transportation staff or transportation department to effectively plan to evacuate a bus, especially when we're talking about a special education bus. So we need to get a team together. That could be a team member from special education, school administration, a nursing staff, if that is something that we need to address with one or more of our students, a crisis response team, and maybe even your local EMS. Start the conversations and create the relationship. Be proactive. Is there really nothing you wouldn't do to save a child's life? And we definitely know the answer to that. We want to have an honest assessment, what we really can do, what is possible, and what is just not going to be a reality. We want to balance with best practice expectations, and we want to make sure that we are in compliance. When you're planning to write the plan, you want to educate yourself in techniques. Are you going to carry the students off the bus? You're going to drag the students? Do you need a drag blanket? What is your attendant going to do? What is her responsibility? And what are the students' responsibilities? Know the bus. And when you're training new bus drivers, that's difficult to know all the types of buses in the fleet. But it's important to be proactive about that. Understand the objective under all the circumstances. Is it a fire? Did someone hit the bus? Are there down wires? Is it flooding? Know what's going on and use the what if technique. Transportation must be included from the beginning. So working together with parents, with that IEP team, with the special needs department is essential for the students that you transport. So access the student information. You as a transportation provider should have access to IEPs, but you only need to have access to information that you need. You only take what you need, right? You don't really need to know what accommodations the students need in math or different other subjects in school, but you absolutely need to know what a student needs on your school bus. What level of assistance is needed? Do they need communication devices? Do they have picture cues that help them jump from one task to the other? Do they need hands-on assistance? Do they need a wheelchair lift? How about a service animal? Are you prepared for that? Is the student able to provide assistance to other students? Can the student operate the two-way radio? Can they lead and help others to safety? Looking at the combinations, staff, equipment, student, and student combinations. Each bus will have a unique equation for risk. You may need to adjust your combinations to minimize those safety risks. Understanding and knowing the students on your bus. Are they going to freeze in fear? Are they a runner? Could they become combative or aggressive or oppositional? Or potential reactions to leaving their personal belongings behind? These are all very legitimate issues that you need to plan for and be considerate of. So your program planning considerations. You should understand your staff limitations, physically, contractually. Are they able to drag a student? Do they know how the correct procedure to take a student out of their wheelchair? We need to be training and know what to do in worst case scenarios. Route considerations. Maybe you need to plan to change your route if there is a flood warning and your bus drives right next to a floodplain. Possibly you need to change or speak with your transportation department about changing your route, the length of your route, and the distance from all emergency resources. Are you close to a fire department? Are you close to a rescue squad if a student starts to have a seizure? School bus considerations: the width of the aisle, the height of the rear door, the service door step height, the wheelchair lift door as an emergency exit. Can you manually operate that? It's very difficult to do. So if you haven't done that in a while, that's something you might want to refresh your memory on. It's also suggested too that you blindfold yourself and try to feel around the bus. So in case if your bus was engulfed in flames or filled with smoke, you would be able to see or to feel your way out of the bus and to safely evacuate students from your bus. Special needs planning consideration: physical need, communication assistance, comprehensive levels, adjusting the safety, the vocabulary, cognitive abilities, judgment, stress impact, memory, emotional behavior, medical implants. Students have shunts or nerve stimulators, a tracheotomy. Do they have seizures? Oxygen dependent. What do you do with the oxygen if there's a fire? Know what to do. Latex allergies, if the student has a DNR. Preschool planning consideration: the size, stepping, sliding, they have little bitty short legs. Fight or flight responses, they tend to hide. We've seen preschool students hide under the bus seats, and they are very good hiders. The number of CSRSs on the route, can they all be removed by one person? Does it need more than one person? Do you need more than one belt cutter? And do you know how to use the belt cutter? If students are crying or unresponsive, do you have a plan? Do you know what to do? Identifying your equipment. Identifying the quickest way to get the student out of the CSRS. Know what you can do, know what they can do, know what your assistant can do if you have an assistant. Are there any unique issues? Do they have to stay in their CSRS? This is where it's absolutely important that you know the students that you're transporting. Have a written plan. This is essential, to have a written plan and have the what if case scenarios. If you're ever out, if there's a substitute, or you're called to do something else, they know what to do. And practice your written plan. Review it and improve on it. Allow your team to practice. It's absolutely important to practice, and doing so, you'll find certain issues that, oh, this is not going to work. We're going to have to do something else. So you're planning, and if something happens, you're going to be ready. Trying in all aspects is key. Emergency equipment operation, moving students quickly, controlling students outside the bus. Who's going to watch those kids when you're helping someone else? So evacuation related training, when to evacuate, know when you need to get off that bus, what's the best exit to use, where to evacuate. Train related evacuation issues. If your bus currently doesn't go over railroad grade crossings, you still need to plan for it. You could be on a field trip. Do you evacuate in or out of the wheelchair? Do you take the wheelchair with you, or is it better to remove the student from the wheelchair? And use of the belt cutter. Do you know how to actually use the belt cutter? I would suggest that you take those old CSRSs that have expired, they do have expiration dates on them, and practice cutting those straps. It's not as easy as you may think. You have to put a little muscle into that. Plan review must be a part of the operational procedure. Maybe you can have a work day and this is all you do for that day. You practice your special needs evacuation training. In addition to whenever modifications are made to the route, you need to update that plan. The living evacuation plan. Monitor all changes on each route. use your bus staff. Look for changes in equipment, changes in staff, changes in students, routes, or student combinations. Go back and measure the impact to the plan. Thank you so much, Kathy, for this valuable information. Her contact name and number is listed there. She is a worth of knowledge. If you ever want to contact her, she welcomes your questions or comments. Now we're going to watch a very short YouTube video on emergency evacuations of special needs transportation in less than a minute and a half.
Dispatch, I pulled over at I Street, and D, you're going to evacuate the bus. I've got smoke. All right, kids, let's go out the back. I want the back seats first. Okay, we're going to go out the back. Hey, leave your backpacks. Let's go, guys. I want you over by the tree over here, please. Here we go. There you go. All right. Over by the tree, please. Over by the tree. Good. Get your seatbelt off here. We're going to leave the chair behind here, all right? Here we go. All right, arms up around my neck. Okay. Here we go. All right, down to the lift cover. Okay, I'm gonna step over you. All right, I'm gonna pull you back. You ready?
Yeah.
Here we go, John. Shoulders are over. Sit you up. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Pull you straight back. Just drag out, okay? Feet are gonna drop. Ready? Here we go. We're gonna go away from the bottom.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about autism. I can tell you that information that we're already finding out is that it's changing every single day. Like this PowerPoint is probably already outdated. We are learning so much about autism, but I do like this first slide where it says always unique, totally interesting, and sometimes mysterious. And I heard a quote that said, if you met one student with autism, then you've met one student with autism, which just simply means that they're individuals and their needs and disability varies greatly. We are learning that with autism. Some of the characteristics, and I'm sure that this has changed since I've made this PowerPoint, but it's developmental disability, significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally evident before age 3, adversely affecting the child's educational performance. Children with autism may exhibit obsessively repetitive behaviors such as rocking back and forth, repeatedly are exhibiting rhythmic head or foot movement. Children with autism can be self-abusive, banging their heads, slapping, pinching, poking, or biting themselves. And I've recently just found out that one of the reasons why students may bite themselves or bang their head is for sensory. They want to feel their head. They want to feel their arms and know that it's there. So unusual responses to sensory input, for instance, an exaggerated response to sound. Children with autism exhibit a wide range of intellectual and behavioral differences. Some students with autism are extremely withdrawn and do not communicate at all, while others communicate in a bizarre or meaningless manner to us or to someone without autism. Some children with autism may exhibit periodic emotional outbursts. Some children with autism are hyperactive, while some are just lethargic. They may exhibit abnormal responses to objects. For instance, they could be extremely afraid of the bus, the school bus. Did you know that autism now affects 1 in 88 children and 1 in 54 boys. And I absolutely believe that this figure is incorrect, and that is much, much higher now. Autism is the fastest growing serious developmental disability in the U.S. It costs a family $60,000 a year on average. Boys are nearly 5 times more likely than girls to have autism. There's no medical dictation for or cure for autism. It's the fastest growing developmental disability, 1,148% growth rate. And this is already changing the autism spectrum disorder. They no longer call it Asperger's disorder anymore. It is high functioning autism. Challenges for the bus ride. Children with autism can often be sensitive or resistant to a change in a daily routine. For instance, if a different bus, a substitute driver, or a change in the route can have a strong effect on a child with autism. In sudden emergencies such as a bus fire, a child with autism may actually resist evacuating the bus. So this is where you absolutely need to have a plan in place and know what you're going to do, how you're going to set that student up to succeed. So some strategies. It's essential for drivers and aides to consciously ignore behaviors that don't jeopardize safety. That's our number one priority, is for a safe transportation. An established daily routine can minimize inappropriate behaviors. When safety is jeopardized and intervention is required, simple 1 or 2 word directions are usually most effective in correcting dangerous behavior. Use a quiet, gentle, but firm voice. Do not provide complex choices to children with autism. It can upset them. A small object to hold, for instance, a shoestring, a rubber band, a favorite piece of cloth, a small toy, a stuffed animal, sometimes calms children with autism. Some enjoy using a calculator. Distracting the student is often the most successful form of intervention. Storyboards have been a wonderful intervention process, and identifying key locations along the bus route can help calm the student, especially if a change has occurred. Some children with autism use a keyboard communication device. This is their voice. If drivers know that they will be off the next day, they should let the school and the child's parents know the day before. A well thought out evacuation plan is absolutely essential. When severe behavior problems occur, drivers must pull the bus over in a safe location. Why is it important to treat students with disabilities as individuals? And what is the best strategy for safely transporting students with special needs? We need to be aware. A key goal is to create awareness of the problems children with disabilities face. Current information, transportation of students with disabilities is constantly evolving, as we've seen in this PowerPoint. It's essential to stay up to date with safety procedures. Confidence. Driving children with disabilities is a big responsibility. Make sure you're aware of the resources you have in your transportation department with the student's teacher, with the student that you're providing transportation for, with their teacher, and with their parents. Work with the people who know the student the best. Skills and awareness to confidentially meet the challenges you will face as a bus driver transporting children with disabilities. So autism is not contagious, but a smile is. And you'll see in these next 3 videos, first we'll talk about Jason and what his day looks like. And then we'll watch a short YouTube video about Mikey and his day that involves the school bus. And last but certainly not least, we get to meet sweet Carly, and you'll be changed after this video.
Today's show is going to be a little different. I'd like to introduce you to somebody.
My name is Jason. I'm autistic.
How old are you?
I'm 7.
Favorite animals?
Giraffe. Favorite animals. He's a giraffe. Snail.
Your dad's a giraffe?
Snail.
Snail.
Horse.
Horse.
Cow.
Pig.
Horn sheep.
Okapi.
Rams.
Whale.
Horse.
Fish.
Cow.
Snake.
Duck.
I'm out.
Pig. I love animals.
Do you like dogs?
Yes, we love dogs.
Say, what you want to know about autism?
What should I know autism?
Jason's my nephew, And he's autistic. Up until about 18 months old, he was happy, affectionate, getting into everything and learning to talk. Then he started to gradually change. He made less eye contact, he played alone more, and he quit talking. By the time he was 2.5 years old, Jason was very different. He screamed and thrashed around uncontrollably. He didn't seem to hear when his family spoke to him, and he'd back into a corner, looking at the floor, repetitively twisting the hem of his shirt, which is not normal behavior for a 2.5-year-old, in case you're wondering. For 6 months, my brother and his wife hunted for the cause of his behavior. Autism was initially ruled out because Jason wasn't demonstrating the classic signs. He didn't flap his hands or have any of the other repetitive motion behaviors. He still wanted to be held and hugged and kissed, and while he didn't play with the other children, he still liked being in the same room as them. Recent headlines point to an autism epidemic. Since the 1990s, the number of people diagnosed as autistic has exploded. It's true, but it's not an epidemic. You see, autism is not like Down syndrome. It's actually an umbrella for multiple disorders and conditions. Sometimes it's referred to as the autistic spectrum, and as that umbrella is getting larger and larger, more and more communication disorders and learning disabilities are being labeled and relabeled as autistic. When he turned 3, Jason was diagnosed as autistic spectrum because he fit under the autism umbrella of related pervasive developmental disorders. People want to know where autism is coming from. There's been a lot of noise that autism is the result of governmental vaccination programs, but it seems unlikely. Several independent studies have been done that show no correlation between infant vaccinations and autism. So what's causing it? There are lots of theories and lots of tests still being done, but nobody really knows. And it may be difficult to narrow down. After all, autism is a broad range of developmental disorders. At the end of last school year, Jason was tested for placement, and when my brother went to the meeting with the specialist, they told him that Jason's score showed he was mentally retarded. I've read that up to 75% of people with autism are labeled that way. It's a good thing the camera guy doesn't believe in tests because actually Jason's quite smart.
Hooray for Jason!
When he was much younger, he taught himself how to count, forwards and backwards.
1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
10.
And recently we discovered he knows how to read, sounding out words he's never seen before.
I can read.
Sing ABC.
And bird, cat, dog, elephant, frog, giraffe, horse in the air, guava, jungle, kangaroo, lion, mouse, not the octopus, pig, and I was not snake, turtle and babbit, flutter, XFA, sharp, the zebra. Now, ABCs. Next time for one, you sing with me.
Very good. That was like the animal ABCs.
It was. Wow.
It also became obvious early on that Jason learns differently. He'd make no progress at all, and then one day something would just snap, and he'd be amazing at it. He loves animals, and he'd have people draw pictures for him, pictures of birds and giraffes and snakes. And then one day, my brother walked outside, and the patio was covered with elaborate animal drawings. Ears, eyes, mouths, hooves. We'd never seen him do it. Never even seen him draw an animal. All he'd do was scribble. Low IQ? No, just different. Besides, when communication is the problem, how effective do you think an IQ test is really gonna be? I think if I ignored the tester and just did whatever I wanted to, I'd score pretty low too. Recent studies have shown that autistic brains are mapped very differently from ours, and that brain mapping may be part of the reason why some people who are autistic are also savants. Communication just isn't the same with Jason as it is with other people. Sometimes he understands me perfectly, and sometimes we just don't quite connect.
Say, I am 7 years old. I say, how old are you? And you say, I am 7 years old. Go, look at the camera. How old are you?
Cheese.
Cheese.
One of the hotbed issues right now is early intervention. People are screaming for earlier testing and therapy, and it makes sense seeing how the brain develops the most in the first 3 years. Unfortunately, that's also when autism develops, and the signs that it's coming on are often difficult to isolate. Dr. Stanley Greenspan, a leading researcher in autism, says 2 major mistakes are frequently made in early intervention. Number 1, taking a minimalist approach which doesn't provide the family enough team support, and number 2, overlooking the family dynamics to such a degree that early intervention becomes not a support to the family, but another source of familial stress. Intervention has to consider the well-being of the family as paramount and avoid the temptation of viewing the child as if he or she existed in isolation. Now, this show, like all the others, isn't meant to be all-encompassing, and while Jason has autism, he isn't as severely affected as some of his peers. Jason's behavior may be different, even bizarre, but he's not dumb.
I'm smart.
His developmental disorder is by no means a measure of his capacity or his intelligence, and that's something you ought to know.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I love you.
Mike, here. Get your other hand. Got your drink, Mikey? Mikey, your drink? Mikey. Where's Yellow Bus? Mikey, look at me. Mikey, where's Yellow Bus? Where are you getting upset? It's okay. We're going. Okay. What's missing? It's okay. He's coming. See? There's Yellow Bus. See? See Yellow Bus? See, Mikey? It's coming. Mikey? Mikey? Come on. What's the matter, Mikey? See, there's Yellow Bus. See, there's coming.
Now, what may be the most remarkable coming out event we've ever seen. A little girl is unable to speak a word or connect to the world around her in any way, or so everyone thought, until she turned 11 and suddenly something remarkable happened. ABC's John McKenzie has the story of a girl breaking out of her own body.
You don't know what it feels like to be me. When you can't sit still because your legs feel like they're on fire, or it feels like 100 ants are crawling up your arms.
How is it that these powerful words came out of this flailing body?
People look at me and assume I am dumb because I can't talk.
Something extraordinary happened to this 14-year-old who was written off as mentally deficient, something that may help unlock the mysteries of a baffling disorder.
What do I want? I want to be like every other kid, but I can't because I am Carly.
Born in Toronto, Canada, Carly Fleischman was 2 years old when it became clear she was not keeping up with her twin sister Tara.
When you're told your child is going to be developmentally delayed, that they might achieve the developmental level of a 6-year-old, it's like being kicked in the gut.
When Arthur Fleischman and his wife Tammy learned the diagnosis was autism, they expected the worst, that the twins were headed in different directions.
And how bad did it get for Carly those first few years? Awful. Part of her delays prevented her from walking, from sitting up.
It was clear that Carly, like most autistic children, was lost in her own world, perpetually swimming underwater.
And all the doctors would say, you're the parent. You should do as much as you feel you need to do for this kid.
Carly, stand up.
The Fleischmans were on their own. Experts told them that early intervention was critical.
You use your fork.
So ever since Carly was 3, her therapy has been intensive, unrelenting.
This took about 40 to 60 hours a week of one-to-one therapy. She always had about 3 to 4 therapists working with her. And if you're not getting results with one approach, you move on and you try something else.
You didn't give up. You pushed Carly.
When you look in Carly's eyes, you can see an innate intelligence. So we never gave up. We never gave up.
But if there was intelligence, Carly's ceaseless rocking, flailing arms, and tantrums hid any trace of it. Worse, she couldn't speak. Not a word.
I did not have any expectation that she would have a fluent form of communication.
Dr. Nicole Walton-Allen is a clinical psychologist who led Carly's therapy program.
Her profile was that of a child who was severely autistic and more than likely moderately mentally retarded.
And did you ever think about institutionalizing her?
We had friends saying, you know, you've been plugging away, spending thousands of dollars on therapy. You're not really seeing the progress. So, of course, you start thinking about, should she be in a group home?
But you decided against this.
I could never do it. Could never do it. How can you give up your kid?
Despite thousands of hours of therapy over months and years, Carly's progress was excruciatingly slow. That is until one day 3 years ago when Carly was 11. She ran to a computer for the first time, and what happened next was a breakthrough so profound it would finally pierce Carly's silent, secret world.
And she was quite distressed, and she starts to spell H-U-R, and it was like T, hurt. And then a little bit later on, she spells H-E-L, and we kind of pushed her to finish, and she puts P, so she spells help. Afterwards, she sort of got up, went behind the couch, and she threw up.
Barbara Fenton Nash is one of Carly's longtime therapists. So what did this tell you?
It told us that there was a lot more going on there than we knew. And to us, that was a breakthrough moment because we hadn't specifically taught her the words.
And at first, we didn't believe it. Knowing this child for 10 years and never seeing her write a thing, of course you're going to be skeptical.
Everyone was, including her other therapists, who were now desperate to see proof. But Carly refused to type, exhibiting the same hysterical behavior that led experts to label her as mentally retarded.
She would strip off her clothes. She would go into the bathroom and she would engage in fecal smearing. So the typing was great, but no one could see it.
Here, show me.
What was needed was some tough love. If Carly wanted something, she would have to type for it.
First type, and then you get. Let's go.
Oh, she had to work for it. If she wanted information, if she wanted to go somewhere, she had to type by herself.
Finally, several months later, Carly began to type for others.
She started to realize that by communicating, she had power over her environment.
And what came through her finger, typing one letter at a time, with fluency no one could believe, was astonishing.
I am autistic, but that's not who I am. Take time to know me before you judge me. I am cute, funny, and like to have fun.
Through her torrent of words, Carly began to unravel the mysteries behind her often wild behavior. Like banging her head.
Because if I don't, it feels like my body is going to explode. It's just like when you shake a can of Coke. If I could stop it, I would, but it's not like turning a switch off. I know what is right and wrong, but it's like I have a fight with my brain over it.
Use your words.
And Carly was not shy about expressing her desires and frustrations.
I want to be able to go to school with normal kids, but not have them getting upset or scared if I hit a table or scream. I want something that will put out the fire.
We were also horrified because for years we had spoken in front of her as if she wasn't there.
Now, for the first time, Carly was able to have conversations with her parents.
You think you can write back to Dad?
I want to go on a snowmobile. Can we do it? Will you go on one? I think it would be fun.
So here's your daughter, and finally you get to meet her.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Overwhelming. Overwhelming. I stopped looking at her as a disabled person.
You promised. Did you lie to me?
And started looking at her as a sort of sassy, mischievous teenage girl.
I want people to know that no one is telling me what to say, and I don't have a hand up my butt like a puppet.
Carly has been very clear that she sees herself as a normal child, locked in a body that does things that she has no control over.
Side by side with her twin sister Taryn, it would be easy to dismiss Carly as intellectually challenged. That is, until you ask her a question.
Carly, why do autistic kids cover their ears, flap their hands, hum, and rock?
It's a way for us to drown out all sensory input that overloads us all at once. We create output to block out input.
Carly's brain, unlike most people's, is overwhelmed by the senses of sight and sound, taste and smell.
Our brains are wired differently. We take in many sounds and conversations at once. I take over 1,000 pictures of a person's face when I look at them. That's why we have a hard time looking at people.
The one thing she can control is when and where she'll type.
Oh, this is John. This is John.
And usually she needs to be motivated.
Finish up. You're doing great.
When I tried making conversation with Carly, she would not type back.
I'll tell you anything you want to know.
Her finger hovering over the keys for hours, until I brought up my teenage son.
He wants to play football.
No, she's smiling. It's going to be something funny.
Are you embarrassed?
Come on, we want to hear what you have to say.
Yes, I guess he's cute.
You know, 2 years that we've been communicating, and every time she writes something, there's a little bit of that sense of awe. The room resembled a ship's cabin. Its walls
Dear
were
Dad,
wooden leaves.
I love when you read to me,
by many coats
and I love that you believe in me. I know I'm not the easiest kid in the world.
Give me a kiss.
However, you are always there for me, holding my hand and picking me up. I love you.
I'll go through many sleepless nights to hear that. I'll spend every penny we have to hear that.
Was there one writing in particular that left a lump in your throat?
In this writing where she says, "You've never been in my body. I wish for one day you could be in my body."
A year after we first met Carly, she is happier, calmer, more independent.
Come on, let's get this in the pan.
She's even writing a novel.
I think that humankind is just oblivious to things that have been around for many years.
She also has her own internet blog and Twitters regularly, answering questions from people all over North America.
I think Carly knows that she now has a voice that can help other kids. Now she looks at herself as someone who can make a mark on the world. And that's got to be life-changing.
What do you hope for Carly now?
I want her to be happy. I want her to have dreams and goals and accomplish those goals in spite of her challenges.
I think the only thing I can say is don't give up. Your inner voice will, mine did.
Hello, my name's Kerry Miller. I'm the Associate Director of Pupil Transportation for the Virginia Department of Education. Thank you for participating in our online web training series and your commitment to safe pupil transportation.